Alright, here we are back again to part 3. This is episode 4 from the 17th of December 2017. Carrying over, we were abruptly interrupted as the video ended on the last one. Even though I'm assembling this in Adobe Premiere and I see how long the video is, sometimes when I get to doing the voiceover, I have the viewing display out a lot larger, undocked and a lot larger, so I can actually see what's going on. Read the words in the video. It covers up that, and I don't always get to see when the video is going to end on time. So anyway, this recording was recorded on the 15th of December 2017, and the audio version is being done on the 18th of December. I don't know why I titled it 17 December. That's that ADHD kicking in. As you know from watching all my videos, I have OCD and ADHD, and a lot of times with ADHD, you write things thinking you're writing one thing, only to come back 30 minutes to a half hour later and realize you wrote something completely different. Especially with numbers and names. One of the side effects of having ADHD, and to some extent OCD, is you're always taking notes to remember what you did before. Anyway, that's a story for another day. So here we are, we're back in, carrying on in the basin here. The basin is basically an area of Northrend that's north of the Borean tundra. For those of you not familiar with the game, it's like a sunken area, kind of like if you took Louisiana in the United States and took it to extremes. Basically, we're below sea level here, which is why that boat crashed in the little lake there. But the ocean is actually a higher level than where we're at. But there's this huge land, which is like a wall, which is acting like a natural dam. And it's created this basically natural barrier, which why this basin is much lower than the actual sea level of the world. I guess they came up with the idea, if you remember, the Katrina stuff happened in 2005, and I imagine that's when this stuff was in development, as it came out at the end of 2009. So they probably developed this land based on that area. Northrend is a weird continent in that on one side you have this tundra, which is in the south, and the colder it goes, you go into this region north of it, which is a tropical region, which is this sunken basin, and just north of that is this Arctic type condition. What's this? Not a storm peak, but winter cross, whatever it is. Anyway, but as you go east on the continent, along the south, it sort of continues on with that Siberian sort of environment, and when you get into the I call it the Scottish area, Machloden area, and then below that it's more like if you go to the Norway with the fords and stuff. So it's a rather weird continent in that sense. It has such a huge variance in just the land. It's a very pretty environment, but what's weird with this area is that it has this sort of, if you ever go to like Louisiana where the bayou is, it's actually below sea level. Because it's this, they have these huge, the natural part of the land, it has, I forget the term for it, but these natural land barriers which create sort of this dam-like conditions where the area is actually below sea level. But the terrain here is like Southeast Asia type terrain. It's kind of weird in that sense. If you're a person who studies like geography and geology, um, the way the land is in this area doesn't make any sense when you think of it. Here I was just playing around with this thing. I couldn't figure out what they wanted to do with this chicken thing, and so I had to, it took me a minute to figure out what to do with it. So but it ended up, it's this double clicking mechanism. You just throw your net on the chicken, then you walk up and right click on it, and that is how it ends up in your little nest. At first I didn't know that. See? But I stumbled upon it accidentally. See, I was just throwing it on there, but I wasn't getting anything. I was like, what's going on with this thing? So then I walk up to it. I think here. Yep, see, and I accidentally figured it out. How many discoveries are made in the universe by accident? There's a gag or joke if you ever study anthropology with archaeologists. All the great discoveries are usually discovered by someone not even looking for it. Think of a anthropologist studies for 8 years to become a doctor, to get a doctorate degree. Goes out into the world, and all the great discoveries, usually some guy with an ox cart, not even looking for anything, and just happily stumbles upon some great historical discovery. It's never the person actually looking for it that finds it. It's always some guy not even looking for it. That's how in World of Warcraft, how you discover how things work. It's all by accident. Happenstance. One of the things that I wanted to kind of get back to in part 3 here was what I was sort of leading to in part 2 was the advancing, or how World of Warcraft is different now. I wrote some notes. Try to keep on pace here, but I feel Cataclysm, and when they changed the original parts of World of Warcraft created a hole in the story for new people. If you think back to 2004 and 2005 when World of Warcraft came out, it was only 10 years in all, but World Warcraft was pretty fresh in people's mind. Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3 were all pretty fresh. Diablo 2, I guess, was coming out. And at that time, Blizzard was known for taking a long time to develop a game. They weren't known at that time as a company that just quickly threw out stuff. So, um, which I appreciated as a player. At that time, Sony Online Entertainment was the powerhouse company in online, especially in the world of MMORPGs. Um, Sony Online Entertainment was the powerhouse company. They had EverQuest. They had just put out Star Wars Galaxy. They had just put out a EverQuest Online Adventure for the PlayStation, which was sort of like a watered down version of EverQuest. EverQuest was a massive game at that time. And in 2004, 2005, at that time, EverQuest was going on almost 10 years, right? Because although officially they're copyrighted if you look at the internet, they say 1998. EverQuest actually really comes out in 97. That's how I remember it. I remember the box set, buying it. I remember buying the box set for EverQuest, but I didn't actually play the game. I had the box for like almost a year until I actually loaded it up and played it. Because I was just so busy at the time. I said, "Ooh, this looks neat," but until I actually loaded up and played it. But EverQuest was at that time in 2004 had almost 9 expansions. And it was kind of like a joke. Like if you loaded EverQuest in and bought a character, bought a subscription, you'd had to sit through almost a week worth of upgrades before you actually got to play the game. That's how many expansions they had. And Star Wars Galaxy was at that time. It was sort of before they changed and neutered Star Wars Galaxy. It was on an uproar. They were in the 200,000, 300,000 subscription range. I remember people really into it. Then that sort of implodes. And so when World of Warcraft comes out, Warcraft 3 is very fresh on people's mind. People know the lore. There are enough people in the world that know the lore to World of Warcraft. So when you start the World of Warcraft, it's kind of like an expansion to Warcraft 3. So Warcraft 2 have built a huge following over time. I forget when Warcraft 2 actually came out, but I just know it was a big game. Warcraft 3 was huge. I don't think Warcraft 3 was as big as Warcraft 2. Although they've gone back and redid Warcraft 3 and put all the things in the two. If you go onto the Blizzard store, it's now been sort of redone, but remastered, I guess, which is really cool. They redid StarCraft recently, but when they created Cataclysm, I think it created a hole in the story, the continuity of the story. So if you're a new person starting right now in World of Warcraft, since we're now 5 expansions past Cataclysm, you have really no idea what's going on in the game. The stuff with the Wrath of the Lich King doesn't make any sense when you come to Netherin now. I feel that
Far
as a
away.
person who's actually played before the Cataclysm. As a returning player, there's a huge hole in the story. It's not like in Star Wars where they advanced the timeline by 5 years, but where BioWare differed from Blizzard with Star Wars was that if I start the game right now in Star Wars and play the first 60 levels of the game, that world still exists. I still come in the game, I see what's going on, but then when you get past the Revan storyline and start Knights of the Fallen Empire, where it creates this huge story system and it advances the timeline in the game by 5 years. Um, they don't erase the first part of the game out of the story. It's still there for people to experience. See what I'm saying? So when you skip over content in the game, a lot of people don't like to do it, especially people who are like role players, because they like that part of the game still. You can still experience that. Where I think Blizzard went wrong is they totally erased that out of the game. So now I think it created a huge rift for people who are just sort of starting the game for the first time. And so now what has to happen, why I think they have to put their vanilla stuff out there is I don't think they realize that they create a huge hole in the story so with the lore. So if you're a person just starting out right now, the lore doesn't make any sense. So with people who are like at level 110, if they had started from the original game, which I've seen a lot of online streams with the people playing WoW, um, who have level 110 characters, but they didn't really experience. They came along after Cataclysm, so the vanilla WoW is kind of alien to them, and the story's alien to them. I feel as a returning player that from a story point of view that Blizzard created a hole in the story. And I think to me them remastering what they call the classic stuff no longer exists in the game. And I think it creates a problem for characters. Now for this character in particular, who's sort of started with the original stuff, then they zeroed it out basically. Had to go back and redo all the starter area stuff because it didn't carry over. Kind of, I don't want to say robbed the character or stole something from the character, but it created a huge mess for the character. So, like, I don't see why they didn't just have the expansion add to the game. See what I'm saying? So, like, when you reached a certain point in the story, your character reaches a certain point in the story, then the game changes from that point on for that character. See? In Star Wars, they do that. You hit the button, they say, up from this point on, everything that was is going to completely change. See what I'm saying? So, like, when they destroy the starter areas in Star Wars, there's a certain point in the game that you make that happen. As a player character, a certain part in your story where you make a decision and boom, it changes forever in the game, which begins once you get into the higher part of the story and you're like level 70, level 80, that happens to you. In this game, they didn't do that, and I think they regret doing that. because, as I'm saying, as I'm trying to get to my point, it's like there's a huge hole in the story. And that is because early on in the game, what I was trying to get to in part 2, which I don't think I successfully did, is that the story of Warcraft isn't really tied to a specific class of character. Like, as I played a Warcraft, I had a story that was specific to the Warlock, and that primarily dealt with the concept of Fel. In World of Warcraft, Fel is sort of like the Force in Warcraft. There's a dark side and a light side. And if you go all the way back to Warcraft the story, which is what the movie highlighted, the humans didn't know anything about Fel. It was a new concept to them, but it was always there. The humans dealt with the arcane part, the light side of magic. And that's the importance. When you watch Warcraft the movie, where the Horde come into the world through the gate, the portal, the dark portal, that happened in Warcraft the game. That was the story of the game. And for people who have just started playing World of Warcraft and they go watch Warcraft the movie, they're like, what in the world is going on? See what I'm saying? They're lost. There's a whole generation of players that don't know that part of Warcraft. So like it seemed like they took the story out of context. Where if you're someone like me who actually played Warcraft, the movie Warcraft was awesome because they followed exactly with the game Warcraft. And it's sort of, I think 28, if you go by the timeline, I believe it's 28 years before the events in the classic World of Warcraft when they take place. I don't know if that makes sense. I think it does. But so for the Warlock, who is essential, the first Warlock in the lore historically is Detan, the Horde Warlock, right? Or Durtan was the war chief for the Horde. The guy who was the I forget his name, but it starts with a D. Whatever, I'll have to look it up. But well, luckily, through the magic of being able to stop the audio session, go watch the movie again, and come back. Yes, the Warlock in Warcraft, Gul'dan, the Orc, he is, in terms of the history of Warcraft, a historical figure. He's the oldest living Warlock in the universe at the time. And the Guardian, Medivh, in Warcraft, he was the most powerful mage in Azeroth at the time. And he gets seduced by the Fel, and the other mages in the story have no idea what the Fel is. And I think for many people that have watched doing streams online, I get the sense that they don't even really understand what the significance of the Fel in the story. And when you do all these raids on, like they're watching the cutscene where the guy's putting a sword into the planet, they don't really see the significance of that scene and how it ties all the way back to Warcraft, the game, and Warcraft, the movie. And I think what creates that problem is when Blizzard put the Cataclysm in the game, I think they didn't respect or fully appreciate keeping the classic part of the game in the game intact. I wish they would have did like BioWare did, where they created a separate story mode of the game. So no matter where you're at in like, because when you make a game like this, it's kind of like an amusement park. Every area has its own little theme, and people can do things outside of the story, like raid, dungeons, PvP, or daily quests, those type of things. And like Star Wars, you have that which is done outside the story mode. And they have 3 different levels. They have story mode, veteran mode. It's people who've done the story but want to advance to get the higher equipment. And then they have the I forget what the other. It's like their elite version or heroic version. And but in Star Wars, they don't call them raids. They call them operations. So you go on an operation, because if you're on the Empire side or Republic side, or the Alliance is the neutral people, and so which is part the organization tied to the story. But in Star Wars, when you go to story mode, you hit the button and it takes you to your own private instance, that character's instance, and the decisions you make in the story. Your story can be completely different from, say, if you have like a lot of alts, from another character in your inventory, or even another player. What happened in their story can be completely different than what happened in your story. So, and the way the companions work in Star Wars, your decisions could get some of those people killed. Like in my stories, some people could be killed off, where in someone else's story, that person still lives on. Or you could have relationships with people in the story, where in other people's story, they might dislike that person altogether based on the decisions that they made. So I wish Blizzard would have created a system like that before they made the Cataclysm, where it completely changed the starting areas. And that's one of the reasons why it's taken me almost 12 months to kind of figure out where this character's place is in the world, because I had to go back and figure out what all my equipment was, where this character coming back was 80. In 2009, 80 was the 8085 was the highest level character. So glyphs were a new thing back then. That was the thing everybody was running around trying to get. Now coming back, all that's gone. That's the same thing with this artifact system. I spent 12 months trying to understand exactly what artifacts do, what my character's interaction with that system is, and now that I kind of understand it and what I need to do to get it, it's going away. So I'm not really sure. In terms of equipment, I'm not really sure what kind of equipment this warlock really needs, you know. Because to get all that stuff, you don't need all that high-end equipment to get it, because you'll have to beat that with regular everyday equipment, right? So we'll see. One problem that I see, my character is surfing on an alligator or crocodile. It's kind of funny. One problem that I see that has occurred in the game, at least from my perspective, is that most of the storytelling that has advanced since the Wrath of the Lich King have all been done on the raid side of the game. Now for people that haven't done any raids, how do they know what's going on in the story? Because all the significant cutscenes occur from doing the raids, at least now in 2017. All the stuff that advanced the story for was it Antaros, Argus? Those all occurred in raids. What about the people who aren't doing raids? You know, or like my character, who's like, by the time we advance the character from 80 to 110, all the stuff that's right now that are high-end stuff are no longer going to be high-end gear. See, there's something that's going to be completely different in that time. See what I'm saying? So, people who are just starting in the game, say if you started right now with a level 1 character, it's going to take you months to get to a point to where you can even do a raid. To where people will even, like, if you start the game as a completely new person, you can't even really get on a dungeon. The great thing with the dungeon tool is it's great at finding tools, but the problem is the people that play a lot of the dungeons don't want to play with new people. I don't want to say everybody. If you meet a lot of social, there's plenty of people who will go out there with new people and take their time and explore the world and experience the game through their experience because it's completely new. Or someone like me that, at least up until Wrath of the Lich King, I really know what's going on, but from Cataclysm on, everything's, to me, is kind of new. Even though it's been 7-8 years later that stuff's been around. Everything is really from Cataclysm on, for me, completely new. So, when I left the game, I was thinking about glyphs. I was thinking about what changes were going to occur. I know coming in the next patch, was it 7, 3.5, something like that, that they're finally going to have scaling difficulty, I guess. Like in Star Wars, The Old Republic. When I go to different planets, they're zoned for like level 1 to 10, level 11 to 20, 21 to 30, and so forth. So like, and then the resources you can get on those planets are in that scale. So everything is balanced according to that. See what I'm saying? So the economics of the game work around all that. So even as they add more new stuff to the game, they simply just build off that. You see what I'm saying? All the other stuff just doesn't go away. But the problem in this game is there's really 3 different type of gear in the game. The stuff that people not doing raids have, the stuff that people doing raids have, and then the stuff that people doing PvP have are completely different. Now in a lot of games, and I hope I'm not sounding like I'm babbling, but in a lot of other games, the growing trend is PvP has become kind of like a sport, where they have a season. And a lot, at least in Star Wars and Neverwinter's PvP isn't as in-depth as Star Wars. Star Wars is the only one that I've seen that's really in-depth. And then DC Universe is pretty in-depth. They have a really good PvP system. But both Star Wars and DC have similar PvP systems where it's a completely different set of gear that you get. But every year they come out with new sets. So like the set you had last year won't work in this year's PvP when the season starts. And their season usually starts like in February, and then they have like a short season in the spring, a long season in the summer, and then a short season in the fall. See what I'm saying? So the gear is good all year long, and then depending on what season, you everyone starts at 0. Then you have to grind your way, and then to get the higher end gear, the advanced stuff, the elite gear, you have to get the original set first, because you need the original set to be able to get the upgraded set. That's what I'm saying, because it's part of the upgrade. And I wonder if I can see Blizzard going in that direction, because that system sort of drives the economics in their game, even with their free-to-play and even with the subscription-based game. That's what drives the economics in the game. So you have sort of the long-term player who's into sort of crafting. They're building stuff. They're building all the high-quality stuff in the game that the PvP people need. And the PvP people are just generating money, so they can just simply buy the stuff they need. See what I'm saying? And then Raid in a lot of games has sort of become the hybrid of the two different environments. Sort of the marriage of the two. And it's usually a longer grind. There's not a time limit to it in the PvE part of it, but you need a lot of people to do it. Like a raid, you need like 25. Now I'm gonna go off subject here, but I was listening to Sea Breezy's stream the other day, and what's her name? Trey Chat stream, and they were talking about how raids were changed to like from like 25 to 15 man. And for me, I recall the reason why they changed it wasn't that people weren't interested in doing 25 man or 15. I think it was because the limitation of computers at the time, servers at the time, couldn't handle a 25 person raid. I mean, they were lagging all over the place. And so they scaled it back to like 10 and 15 people, because it was sort of at the limitation of what their servers could handle. And I think computers since that time have come a long ways as far as power and processing ability, that they can now do a 25, 30 man sort of rating. The hardware's there and memory is there at a price that's affordable for the company, that they can kind of do that now. And with, I think, streaming videos, that sort of technology and service is gonna take off in a way that these games can drive in revenue from advertisers. And that's more of on the YouTube end, and not something directly that Blizzard has to do. It's sort of a byproduct of what they're doing. But the driving force behind that is the online game. And World of Warcraft, I think, still has the largest market as far as game players out there, even in a subscription base. I think they're the largest market of game players out there. I think World of Warships, the wargaming is kind of getting up there, but I don't think wargaming is doing the numbers that I think in 2004, 2005, Blizzard was reporting what, 10, 12 million people. I think those numbers have held. Even if they scaled back to about 10 and 9 million, that's still a lot. Most other games are in the 1-2 million range. So 100,000, 200,000 range is a significant amount of people, and those are free-to-play games. You know, games without subscriptions. So, and I believe Activision and Blizzard posted just from their online store with their cosmetic stuff. I think their revenue was like, was it $3.2 billion in revenue? So I think they got a lot of money. They got some. They're not really hurting for cash. They're not hurting for cash. Here we go. Switching over to I thought there was some kind of map error there, so I restarted the game. What it was is I took a break. So I paused Fraps, and then I went out to the login screen so I could hold my space. That's what I did. I took a break. Yeah, so I like to take breaks. Getting off subject here, I like doing these videos at this point more like a hobby. At some point I eventually would like to do streaming videos because I think it's a little easier to do. Because then you can just do the voiceover right there as you're doing the stream. And then sort of take the stream and then cut it down to something, like hit the highlights, I guess. But I kind of like doing long formatted videos, as I think a game, if you're primarily a player or person who's into the role-playing aspects of the game, I think these longer formatted videos are better. Because for me, the way I am as a person, I like the longer formatted stuff. I don't really like 10 minutes, 15 minute snips. I think 15 and 10-minute snippets are really cool and that's fun, but I think that too much emphasis is placed on doing everything quick, simple, easy. But I think you lose a lot of context. I like watching some of the longer streams that are like 6 and 8 hours long. Even if they're not live, I'll sit there and watch the entire stream because I find it interesting. I think you learn more about people in the stream. It's kind of like in the old days when people journaled in books, real journaling, and not that crazy stuff you see on TV, but real journaling. A person actually sat down and wrote all the essential parts of what was going on in their life with the people around them, and wrote in detail and good memory. And a lot of our great works of literature were based on people's actual ability to journal, write journals, detailed journals. And to me, the modern day MMORPG sort of is that. And these longer formatted videos, in my mind, um, is the equivalent of the modern day journaling, storytelling. And for me, I like watching the long format videos. I feel I get more value out of them when I can sit back and be entertained by them, because I play a lot of online games, and when I play online games, I play for like 7 and 8 hours. So having a program that I can just put on the television and let it go, and I can just sit there and watch it all day long while I'm playing is to me entertaining. And I feel like I'm catching up on people. And I watch a couple streams out there, and in World of Warcraft and other games, that I feel like once a week or twice a week I catch up on game players, which I find fascinating. And then my video production is kind of behind, because at this time I'm not doing live streaming because I don't have the hardware to do it. But at the coming into 2018, I intend to change that. But as of today, I don't have the ability to do that, and so my videos are slightly delayed. I have to record them, capture them, and process them for audio with a voiceover, which I prefer to do the audio on a separate take, because if I was to do the voiceover in Fraps, what tends to happen with Windows is it puts all the sound and video all together, but they're actually in different channels, and what happens is if the video lags, speeds up and slows down, what happens is your audio track that you're doing your voice gets all out of sync with the video and sound from the game. So in the game, to me, watching it would look perfectly normal, but when I go back on playback, what I'm saying might have something that happened in the video like 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago. So I prefer to keep the quality up. I prefer to do the voiceover on a separate take. Plus, if I have to stop and look things up, it's a little easier to do that. And you can't really do that in a live stream. Plus, my audience right now isn't really all that large, so I can get away with that kind of stuff. Imagine as the audience gets bigger or grows larger, I might change my philosophy on that. But here we go. We're here. We were helping the one little group, which is basically at war with these, I'm gonna call them Mylock looking dudes. They're sort of between a goblin and a Mylock, but they're land-based guys here. So we end up helping these guys, and then the other people get mad at us. And then in the process of helping them, we end up killing the dude that they're both at war with. And then because we do that, the other side that thought we were traitors end up liking us again, basically, in the story. Which is kind of a little cute story that we end up doing. But getting back to my narrative about the Fel and how it relates to World of Warcraft. In the movie, that's where you see the Fel is introduced to humans on Azeroth, and the Guardian, Medivh, and the land of Karazhan. That's that little temple where when you start your into World of Warcraft as a Death Knight, I believe that's the tower in the game, right? Where Arthas comes back. As you know, the Warcraft the movie is before Arthas' time. He doesn't turn until Warcraft 2. So people that aren't familiar with the actual story of Warcraft, who play World of Warcraft, and I imagine that's a lot of people, because a person who's between 20 and 25 now playing World of Warcraft, which is most of the people I see doing streaming videos, when World of Warcraft came out in 2004, it was what, 10 plus 7, 13, 14 years. So if they're 25 now, going back, they would have been between 10 and what, 7 years old at the time World of Warcraft came out. So they would have been way too young to know the story or appreciate the lore. And if they go all the way back to Warcraft, that was 23 years ago. So they went to see the movie. I think that's why a lot of people say, I don't really understand what Warcraft was about. It's because they think the people in Hollywood created a completely different story for Warcraft based on Warcraft, and they didn't. That's exactly what happens in the game Warcraft. It's a person who's in their mid 20s right now. They weren't even alive when they were like what 1, 2 years old when Warcraft was out. Not even born yet. So someone like me, I'm what 46 now, I think. Yeah, 46. And not that I can't remember my age. I don't really keep track. But 46, I was in my 20s when Warcraft came out. Yeah, so I was real practical gamer. When World of Warcraft came out, I was, see, if you say 2004, I was what 32 at the time. So that was after Phantom Menace that came out. And episode 3 of Star Wars was just coming out. I saw episode 8 on Friday. That was really cool. I liked it. There might be some spoilers. I'm not going to do it here, but I really liked episode 8. It was really cool. I think it sets up episode 9 really well. And of all the theories I've heard prior to episode 8, most of the ones I've heard were all completely wrong. Which I enjoy. I like it when people make all these predictions and they turn out to be completely wrong. Those would be the people out there crying foul. I didn't like episode 8 because it made me look wrong. I think that's what's happened with... I loved Warcraft, the movie. The first time I saw it was in 4K Ultra HD. It's the first movie that I bought in the 4K format for my brand new television, which I bought last year. Or last Christmas, I bought myself a 50-inch 4K Ultra high definition television last Christmas. This year I plan to augment that purchase by buying a PlayStation 4 Pro, so I can get the 4K upscaler. The PlayStation 3 actually has a 4K upscaler built into it. It just can't read the 4K format. I've actually, because I know I'm going to buy the PlayStation 4 Pro, I've been spending the last couple months stocking up on 4K movies. So when I get the player here, I'll actually be able to use it. Or have movies that fit that format. So here we go. Coming up on the end of this. I've actually shot enough footage in this video journal here that we can make 4 parts. Part 4 is only going to be about 25 minutes to a half hour long. But I was debating on whether to put it in here, but I've been trying to keep all my newer videos around an hour long, because then I'm trying to standardize, or it makes planning the processing time a little bit easier. I know from an hour it's going to take about 8 hours to process. So what I normally do is I start the process first thing in the morning. So by around noon or 2 in the afternoon it'll be done. That way I can upload the movie to YouTube. And that way sometime by 6 o'clock in the evening the video will be processed on YouTube. And if you do that once a day, you get about 6 movies processed and uploaded in a week. 7 if you're daring. But I normally, under the new way that I'm processing my videos, as I've talked about before, I just shoot the video in Fraps, drop it in, assemble it in Premiere, then I do the voiceover, and then once I have the final version, make an MP4 version of that, then I can just delete all the raw footage and recover all my hard drive space. But what has happened since the beginning of December is I shot the footage for DC Universe, which ended up being a 3-part series, which I've uploaded part 1 to YouTube already, but I still have to process, edit, and finalize part 2 and 3 of that. Then I have the 4 parts of this, which is actually 7 hours worth of footage, or 6.5 hours worth of footage that I still need to process. And so I'm scheduling all that out this week because I've been on vacation since last Monday. My vacation started last Monday, so the first week I didn't do a whole lot while I was on vacation. I've just been vegetating and getting caught up on World of Warcraft. But this week, starting Monday, today, I'm going to get back into my video production. And then once I do that, I can recover all my hard drive space back. That's Fraps raw video is taking up.
I don't have a target.
7 hours worth of video footage can take up about 400 gigabytes of hard drive space. Which, my actual schedule, I normally only play World of Warcraft and Star Wars on Saturdays and Sundays. Depending on how my schedule is on the weekend, because it's never the same. Especially during the holidays, it gets crazy because I work at Busch Gardens. And so my vacation actually ends on the 23rd, and I have to work on the 24th and 25th. All next week. All the way up to New Year's I have to work. So I'm trying to get out my schedule all sorted out. But and then it sort of dies down after New Year's, which that's my next big push. But I'm trying to get back my video schedule before the end of the year, which that's just a matter of processing the video, encoding the video on Adobe Premiere, and then uploading it to YouTube. Coming up to the last 2 minutes here. Killing these snakes. This goblin dude didn't really help me, but he just stood by and watched me kill everything. But he's doing a useful thing and pulling the stuff out of the ground. So notice we get to the last couple things and we get a bunch of frogs jumping out of the ground. It was silly, but I kind of like the joke. I get it. I like that the developers have a sense of humor in the game. One of the things I do like about Blizzard is the programmers have a sense of humor, and you pick up on it in the game. If you really look at World of Warcraft, it's a hodgepodge of, if you ever played the original Dungeons and Dragons with the Gary Gygax, before the big lawsuit where they had to change it over to this. If you're not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons and TSR, back in the old days, the guy who created Dungeons and Dragons was Gary Gygax. He had the series of books called the World of Krynn, which is where they get the name Ren from in World of Warcraft. They just changed from Krynn to Ren. Anyway, and that's where the Minotaurs all come from, is Dungeons and Dragons. But when he left TSR in the mid-80s, there was a huge lawsuit. I guess he was tired. He felt that the industry was changing, and with the advent of computers, the writing was on the wall, and he needed to get out quickly. And that's what he did. So there was a huge lawsuit, and because I guess got copyright issues and stuff, and royalty. So that all got settled out, and then in the late 80s, early 90s, that's when TSR started putting out second edition. They had to change everything basically in Dungeons and Dragons, and that's why it's a legal issue. And then World of Warcraft sort of takes a lot of the motifs and themes that were in Dungeons and Dragons, in the original Dungeons and Dragons. I imagine because a lot of the developers probably played it, and so and then they sort of took ideas from Star Wars. That's the end of the part. I'll continue my narrative in a couple of minutes. See you in part 4.